Chapter 4. I Forgive Me. I can't build a future on the soil of self-hate. The night it hit me wasn't loud or dramatic. There was no cinematic thunderstorm outside, no slamming doors, no whiskey glass shattering against the wall. It was quiet, too quiet. I was lying on my back in the kind of stillness where even your heartbeat sounds like it's trying to say something to you. The ceiling above me was just a pale, cracked sky I'd stared at 1,000 times before. The fan turned slowly, its shadow spinning on the wall like a clock hand that didn't care what time it was. The air was heavy with the faint smell of detergent from laundry I hadn't put away. Somewhere outside, a distant car engine hummed and faded into nothing, and that's when the thought slipped in, uninvited, but familiar. Remember that day? I didn't need details. My body already knew which one it meant. A familiar guilt rose up my spine like cold water being poured over me. I felt it seep into my bones, settling in the space between my ribs. My breathing changed, slow, shallow. My eyes didn't move, but my mind was already rewinding the tape. It was a memory I had replayed so many times that it didn't feel like a memory anymore. It felt like a place I still lived in. Years had passed. The person I'd hurt had forgiven me. Life had moved forward. New seasons had come and gone. But here I was, still lying in the same invisible cell, locked in by a sentence I had written for myself. And without thinking, I whispered out loud into the dark, "What's wrong with you?" The words sounded small, even to me. They didn't bounce off the walls. They just sank into the air and died there. But the silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd felt in months. It wasn't peaceful silence. It was the kind of silence that presses its hand over your mouth and dares you to speak again. And that's when I realized something. I was still punishing myself. Not because it was helping, not because it was noble, but because deep down I still believed I deserved it. That was the ugly truth I had been avoiding for years, that somewhere inside I had decided guilt was my penance, my anchor, my fence. I thought it kept me humble. I thought it kept me from becoming the same reckless, selfish version of myself I had been before. I told myself, if you let yourself off the hook too easily, you'll forget the lesson. But here's the thing about guilt. It's not a teacher. It's a warden. Guilt doesn't grow you. Shame doesn't sanctify you. Self-hatred doesn't build a better you. It just keeps you bleeding inside the house you're desperately trying to rebuild. I could stand in front of people and say, "I've changed," but deep down, I would flinch at the sound of my own name. I could smile through conversations, nod, even laugh, all while a private punishment reel played in the background of my mind, a relentless loop of that day, that choice, that moment. I could wear clean clothes, talk about recovery, inspire someone else to take a step forward, and then go home and mentally stab myself with the same knife every night. That wasn't accountability, that was spiritual self-harm, and I was addicted to it. If you've ever lived inside shame for a long time, you know this truth. Part of you feels safe there. It's predictable. It feels noble. It feels like you're doing the right thing by carrying the weight forever. For me, guilt had become a strange kind of shelter, a storm I knew how to survive in, a room I could navigate blindfolded. It whispered, "Don't forgive yourself, you'll get careless. Don't move on, you'll repeat the same mistakes." But over time, I began to notice something else. That weight I was carrying wasn't keeping me upright. It was keeping me from moving. It wasn't making me better. It was making me smaller. I remember turning over in bed that night, my hand brushing against the cool sheet beside me. I stared into the shadows and thought about how much my life had been spent in this exact posture, lying still, replaying the past like I was trying to earn some invisible badge of penance. It hit me that my life had become like a house with only one room, the room of what I did. No matter where I walked, I always ended up back there, and I realized it's not because the door was locked, it's because I had forgotten what it felt like to leave. I didn't make some grand vow that night. I didn't leap out of bed and declare my freedom. It was smaller than that. It started with one question. What if this isn't helping me at all? The question felt dangerous, almost wrong to ask, but I couldn't unask it. And somewhere deep down, a tiny part of me, a part that hadn't spoken in years, whispered back, "It's not." That whisper would become a roar later, but that night it was just enough to make me sit up, swing my legs over the side of the bed, and reach for my notebook. The air felt cooler against my skin, like the room itself knew I had cracked the door open to something new. I didn't know it yet, but that was the night I started the slow, unsteady walk toward saying the three hardest words I've ever had to speak. I forgive me. The notebook was nothing special, just a cheap, spiral-bound thing with a faded blue cover, the kind you could buy at a dollar store and forget about. But that night, it felt heavy in my hands. I sat at the small desk in the corner of my room, the lamp casting a soft amber light that barely pushed back the shadows. My pen hovered over the first blank page, and I froze, not because I didn't know what to write, but because I already knew what would come out if I let it. The truth. The ugly kind. The kind I had been rehearsing in my head for years, but never dared to put into ink, because once it was on paper, it would be real. I stared at that blank page until my eyes watered. The fan above me hummed. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. My hand trembled. Finally, I wrote, "What exactly am I still punishing myself for?" The words looked strange, like they belonged to someone braver than me. At first, the answers came slow. I wrote one sentence, then stopped, another, then stared at the wall. But once the dam broke, the flood came. I wrote about that day, the one that still wakes me at 2 a.m. with my jaw clenched. I wrote about people I'd hurt, opportunities I'd thrown away, words I'd said in anger that still burned my ears when I remembered them. Each confession landed like a stone in my chest. Some were years old, some were almost forgotten, until I saw my own handwriting pull them back into the light. Somewhere in the middle of it, I realized this wasn't just a list of regrets. It was a map of all the places I had abandoned myself. Every entry wasn't just about hurting someone else. It was also about the exact moments I had turned my back on my own soul. The notebook wasn't just paper anymore. It was a mirror. And looking into it, I didn't just see the man I was now. I saw him, the boy I used to be. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, the one with the loose spring that squeaked every time you shifted. He had big eyes that didn't know how to hide pain yet. The light in his room was dim, just the street light coming through the blinds. There were no posters on the wall, no trophies on a shelf, just silence. And he was waiting for someone to come in, someone to tell him he mattered, someone to tell him the mistakes he made didn't define him, someone to tell him he was still worth loving. But no one came, and as I sat at my desk in the present, my chest tightened because I realized I was the one who was supposed to go back for him. I was supposed to pick him up, put my arm around him and say, "I know it's been hard. I know you feel alone, but I'm here now, and I'm not leaving again." People think forgiving yourself is about excusing what you've done. It's not. Forgiving yourself is about rescuing that younger you from the rubble of your worst day. It's about telling him, you can come home now. But here's the catch. You can't save him if you keep punishing him. And that's exactly what I had been doing. Every night I replayed those old tapes, I was dragging that little boy back into the courtroom and sentencing him all over again. I put the pen down. My hand ached. My breathing was heavier than it should have been for just sitting in a chair. I closed my eyes and pictured him again, the younger me, and I imagined walking into that room from the hallway of my memory. He looked up at me, suspicious at first, like I might be another adult ready to tell him he wasn't enough. But I sat down on the bed beside him. I didn't lecture. I didn't list what he had done wrong. I just put my hand on his back and let him lean into me. And I whispered, "You've carried this long enough. I'm taking it from here." That's when it happened. The first tear didn't come from sadness, it came from relief. A deep, bone-deep relief. It was as if my body had been waiting for years to hear me say those words, and now that I had, it could finally let go. Just a little. But here's the thing. Once the first tear fell, the others followed, and with them came something I hadn't felt in a long time. Compassion. Not for other people. I'd been good at that for years. But for me, I had told myself for so long that compassion for myself was dangerous, that it would make me soft, that it would make me forget the lessons pain had taught me. But the truth? Self-hatred wasn't keeping me accountable, it was keeping me imprisoned. And the more I thought about that boy in the memory, the more I realized if I wouldn't talk to him the way I talked to myself, then I had no business treating myself like that now. That night wasn't the end of my self-forgiveness journey, but it was the first time I saw the boy and the man as the same person, and for the first time I didn't look away. The morning after that night with the notebook, the world looked different, not softer, not easier, just clearer. The sky outside my window had that washed-out gray of early dawn, the kind of light that makes everything look a little more honest. I got up slowly, as if not to break the spell of what had happened the night before. The notebook still sat on the desk, the pen resting diagonally across the page. I didn't dare close it yet. Instead, I walked to the mirror. I had been here before, standing in front of this same mirror, brushing my teeth or fixing my hair, avoiding my own eyes. But this time, I didn't look away. It's funny. You think you see yourself every day. You think you know your own face. But when you really look, when you hold your own gaze without flinching, you realize how much you've been dodging. The lines around my eyes weren't just from age, They were from carrying a weight that had nothing to do with years. The set of my jaw wasn't strength, it was defense. And the eyes, God, the eyes told the whole story. They were tired, but under that exhaustion was something else, a hunger, a desperate need for peace. I knew what I had to say. I'd written it in my head 100 times. But saying it out loud, that was different. It's one thing to write, "I forgive you" in a journal. It's another to stand face to face with yourself and mean it. I took a deep breath. My chest tightened like my own body was resisting the release. "I forgive you." It came out quieter than I wanted, shaky. But it was there. I said it again, louder this time. "I forgive you." My reflection didn't change, but something behind it did. Something deep in the place where my shadow had been living. You can't see your shadow move in a mirror, but you can feel it. For years, mine had been right over my shoulder, breathing on my neck, whispering the old verdicts. "You're guilty. You're unworthy. You'll never be free." But in that moment, it took a step back. Not gone, not yet, but retreating. I kept talking to myself, not with fake affirmations or forced positivity, but with the truth. You made mistakes. You hurt people. You hurt yourself. But you've carried the sentence long enough. You've served your time. You are not the sum of your worst decisions. Somewhere between the fourth and fifth time I said it, the tears came again. Only this time they weren't heavy. They were light, like they were making space for something new to move in. I leaned forward, both hands gripping the edge of the sink, and I let myself cry in a way I hadn't in years. Not the silent, clenched jaw cry of shame, but the open, shaking kind that comes when the body realizes it doesn't have to hold the walls up anymore. I didn't plan it, but my hands moved on their own. I reached out and touched the mirror, palm to glass, like I was trying to bridge the gap between the man here and the boy in my memory. And in that quiet, I made a promise. I will not abandon you again. Not for my past, not for anyone else's opinion, not for the comfort of staying broken. There's something no one tells you about self-forgiveness. It can feel like losing, because for so long, your pain has been your armor. It's been the thing that proves you care, that you've changed, that you're not the person you once were. Letting it go can feel like betraying yourself. But standing there, staring at my own red-rimmed eyes, I realized something. Keeping the pain didn't make me noble. It made me absent. And the people who needed me, including myself, needed me present. When I finally stepped back from the mirror, something in my chest felt different. Not fixed, not perfect, but freer. It was the same world outside my window, the same unmade bed, the same notebook on the desk. But I was seeing it from a place that wasn't under my shadow anymore. I knew the shadow would still follow me sometimes. That's what shadows do. But now I also knew I didn't have to live in its shape. Before I left the room, I looked one more time into the mirror, not at my own eyes, but past them. And there he was, the boy from my memory, not sitting on the bed anymore, standing now and smiling. It wasn't the smile of someone who forgot the pain. It was the smile of someone who finally believed he was worth saving. And in that moment, I realized the truth. Forgiving myself wasn't about rewriting the past. It was about giving that boy a future. I walked back to the desk, picked up the pen, and wrote one last line at the bottom of the page. I forgive me, not as a question, not as a hope, as a fact. Then I closed the notebook, not to hide it, but to mark the end of that chapter, literally and figuratively. And when I stepped outside that day, the air felt different on my skin, not because the world had changed, but because I had.